day, the most wonderful time of the year is finally upon us. I mean, sure, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Yule, Boxing Day, Pancha Ganapati, Bodhi Day, and New Year's is all fine and dandy, but nothing compares to Gundam-cember. It's the one time of the year where we look back at the unstoppable mecha juggernaut that has been guiding the anime industry, for good and for bad, for the last 40-some-odd years, and give thanks to Bandai for bestowing upon the world Yoshiaki Tomino's only child in the cramped cubicles of Sunrise's animation studios. Which, you know, might as well be a manger. Okay, all kidding aside, Gundam as a topic is a behemoth to even broach, which is why I only do this every once a year. And even choosing a topic to talk about is a task in of itself. Because the whole franchise is such a storied, all-encompassing beast, no matter what I choose, there will always be a feeling that I'm leaving out a necessary and crucial entry. It's unavoidable because there have been so many memorable chapters to the Gundam saga, and no one man could ever hope to give a proper and complete retrospective of it all, not without devoting their life's work to it. Which I guess you could take it all to mean, stop asking for SD Gundam or else Santa Sage is going to shit in your stockings. But of the many Gundam TV series, films, and OVAs that I've yet to get to, there are a few that I wanted to touch upon sooner than later, and one of them is today's subject, Mobile Suit Gundam The 8th MS Team, a series that answers the age-old question,
what the fuck does anything have to do with Vietnam?
More than you know, the dude. Look, if I didn't make the reference, you all would've. An OVA released over 3 years, 8th MS Team is a curious entry in the franchise, a sort of midquel set during the original war, dubbed the One-Year War, and the first Mobile Suit Gundam. 8th MS Team is a story about, well, soldiers at war, with nary a mention of anything having to do with new and/or types, which automatically places it in my good graces. Funny how the entries that stray away from that tangled mess wind up being the better series, huh? But honestly, that has more to do with the fact that when Gundam chooses to focus on pilots and ground troops or anyone else that isn't the special, the anti-war message can shine through. But as we all know, that's often not enough. Gundam has a reputation of being one of the more uneven franchises in anime history, due to the fact that there's often very little commonality between series, films, what have you, outside of established canon, and even then, that can often be ignored in favor of creating a new canon. Thus, when you talk about individual entries in the franchise, no matter how good they can be, there's always that slow, creeping butt that puts everything good it might have done on its back foot, and 8th MS Team is no exception. However, if you caught the series on Toonami back in the day, you might not know what I'm talking about. But if you saw the anime on tape or DVD, you're probably still angry, aren't you? Either way, it's gonna get interesting. This is 8th MS Team. Even though it's far removed from the conflicts that have ravaged the space colonies, Earth is still reeling from the casualties caused by the One-Year War. Entire continents are divided by the Federation and the Principality, with the Southeast Asian jungle territory being of held importance by both sides. Rumblings of a new experimental weapon has been making waves, threatening to turn the tide of battle in Zeon's favor. But as this dark and terrifying shadow looms over the battlefield, a pair of star-crossed would-be lovers happen upon each other in a chance and random encounter, and they, together, might be able to halt the seemingly ceaseless bloodshed.
We're going to drive those Zeon off our Earth one way or the other!
Got that right. Those Zeeks better watch their asses. You with me? Yeah!
One of the more interesting aspects of 8th MS Team is its attempts to ground the story in an otherwise ungrounded setting. At first, it seems like the premise is in complete diametric opposition to established canon, both in story and design. Gundam, after all, is a sprawling space opera telling tales of interstellar wars and fantastic battles. Meanwhile, 8th MS Team's near-entire story is set in the relatively familiar backdrop of the jungles of Asia, far, far removed from the trappings of space.
Sure took them long enough to get here.
Putting the space battles and the ground battles side to side like this, it's really difficult to tell that they both come from the same anime, let alone the same franchise. And it's not helped by the fact that mobile suits, Gundam or otherwise, were not designed to be terrestrial ordnance. They were meant to zip around freely in a three-dimensional environment, you know, like space. And as such, 8th MS Team kind of has to bend logic over its need to give the story its needed tension. I mean, not for nothing, but when a supporting character's entire job entails trying to track mobile suits in the jungle...
Bearing 2 o'clock.
Range 2300. 2 mobile suits.
You have to wonder just exactly how much he's needed to find a 57-foot-tall, 73-ton giant robot rumbling in the brush. But forgiving the mental gymnastics one has to make to let go of pedantry, 8th MS team's conceit of having the majority of the battles and story take place on Earth comes with it a much appreciated sense of intent. Because, after all, it's much easier to brush aside themes of anti-war if the war in question seems too far removed from recognizable reality. Whereas if you set the conflict in a place where many are all too familiar with, there's no mistaking what the story and creators are trying to accomplish. And so the anime doubles down on the setting, and tones down the more fanciful aspects of the Gundam universe, specifically the Universal Century timeline. Oh sure, there are still plenty of mobile suit battles and other bits of futuristic warfare, but the felt lack of baggage of the UC continuity really helps 8th MS team as a story. Gundams are treated just like special ordnance, requiring specifically trained operatives to properly handle them, not some magic technobot that only the special can have. And because of that, 8th MS team has a certain authenticity that, for my money, no other entry in the franchise has achieved. The setting, combined with the decidedly toned-down sci-fi and metaphysical elements, adds up to a wholly compelling story of human conflict and war, befitting any kind of Vietnam War movie that the series is obviously homaging. In fact, the series really has this appreciable lived-in kind of feel, and truth be known, if you've only seen this on Toonami, a lot of elements that give the anime this feel would be lost on you, because, well, there's just a whole lot of casual nudity. I mean, these are sweaty, repressed young men that are far away from their girlfriends and such, so seeing posters of pinup girls all over the place feels appropriate, but not exactly kid television friendly. Honestly speaking, it's really surreal to see so much casual nudity here, speaking as someone who watched most of his Gundam on television. But all of it is rooted in a real sense of lonesomeness. In fact, one of the best side plots of the entire show comes from Corporal Mikhail Ninarik's letters home to his girl, Bibi. As he writes, often summarizing the events of the episode, you get a real sense of longing as well as a grasp on the tenuous relationship they share, and how the whims of war have them both fraying.
I feel as though the war is pulling you further away from me. And I'm afraid that one day the letters will stop coming. I don't think I'd be able to take that.
Likewise, the element of guerrilla fighters, who battle back the invading Zeon forces, brings with it a much appreciated sense of complexity. Aligning themselves with the Federation only out of necessity and the shared enmity with Zeon, the villagers turned fighters are the driving force that really helps the story hit a gritty, desperate tone.
But the village wants them to pay for what they've done.
Right now, those pilots are desperate to stay alive as well.
You're new to this. We don't care what you think. This fight doesn't end until they're all dead. They're all dead.
But despite the show's best efforts to separate itself from the rest of the Gundam canon, it is a Gundam story at the end of the day. Of the many calling cards that come with the Gundam name, one of the more unfortunate is its predilection toward heavy-handed melodrama, and 8th MS team does have its fair share. If you may remember, running alongside the main plotline of a mystery doomsday weapon is a romantic subplot between two characters from the Federation and the Principality. Our main character, Shiro Amada, begins his journey as a wide-eyed, wet-behind-the-ears pilot who often goes out half-cocked and barely even thinks to ask questions afterwards, often relying on his luck to get him out of deathly situations, all the while keeping a disposition that is yet to be tainted by war.
Commander!
I don't believe it. Will you look at that?
That's how he was in space.
Again, this harkens back to the same kind of characterization we've seen in many a Vietnam War flick before, not the least of which is Platoon. But then Gundam starts happening. After a chance encounter with a Zeon pilot, Aina, Shiro and her have to work together to survive being stranded in a derelict spacecraft. The time spent together leaves a deep impression on the both of them, and when they finally encounter each other again as enemies, both become disillusioned with the politics and the war in general.
Aina? I hate the Zeon. But ever since that day we met in space, I haven't been able to forget about you.
Even more than the mobile suits and Gundams themselves, the franchise truly runs on plots and character moments like this. Inner conflict in the midst of an actual literal conflict. It's a trope that Gundam has used and abused since almost its inception. From the romantic to the purely platonic, loyalties are tested in the midst of battle and passion, which is fine and well and good in your typical Gundam story. But contrasted with the otherwise grounded plot and setting of 8th MS Team, the disconnect is all but tangible. It's no surprise that the anime is at its best when the characters are just trying to survive the war, or are dealing with problems that are caused by the war. Even the ever-complaining petty officer Elidor Massis has his moments of selfishness that really hits home just how merciless and unforgiving the war effort can be.
I warned you, those long-distance love affairs never end happily. But me! I was gonna have a hit song and all my dreams are coming true! God damn it!
Sure, he's a braying jackass, but the war does not care about the life you used to have. And 8th MS Team does an admirable job in portraying this. And for the first half, this is what the show focuses on. But as soon as Shiro and Aina are reunited, the star-crossed love angle comes back into the forefront and the edge is soon ground down. I have a feeling that I would not have such a hang-up on this if the show were set in your typical space colony or just out in the middle of seemingly nowhere, but this whole conceit, combined with the hard-nosed approach to its story, it's like if Apocalypse Now were a musical.
He's not so bad, he's really just an odd man.
And I shaved my head like Dennis Rodman.
Okay, bad example. I suppose I would have also been lighter on this attempt to mix dirt and soap, as it were, if the performances were more even keel. As it is...
He's still fighting?
Ah!
It's borderline goofy.
You got a war face? Ah! That's a war face! Now let me see your war face!
Ah!
Bullshit! You didn't convince me! Let me see your real war face!
Ah!
You don't scare me!
Gundam has had a checkered past when it comes to its dubs, even when it had access to premium talent in LA, and sadly, 8th MS Team is no different. It's not that anyone is necessarily miscast, or they all do a poor job, it's that there always seems to be one or two crucial moments in their performances that are just awkwardly executed, like this was their first or second take.
No, but my brother is wrong.
Aina?
My brother is wrong.
Sure enough, as the series goes on, these instances become fewer and further between, so it could be said that the actors got more comfortable in their roles. Luckily, my favorite character in the anime had an actor that hit the ground running, Rear Admiral Killarney.
Out of my way! Move! Let me through here! Yes! Guineas, there you are! How are ya?
Yuri, stop it. People are staring.
What the hell do we care, huh?
He's just such a pompous dick, I can't help but love him, and he's brought wonderfully to life by Darren Norris, who I'm pretty sure you've all heard before. Chances are you've heard him plenty of times over your Nickelodeon youth as Cosmo in Fairly OddParents, or on Adult Swim as Cowboy Andy in Bebop. But if you're like me, you know him best from Team America.
The name is Spotswood.
Oh, you just know I'm going to abuse the heck out of this situation. And give enough time for the spoiler lead-in...
Jesus, titty fucking.
Sometimes my job is wonderful. But speaking of spoilers, you would be hard-pressed to talk about 8th MS Team without bringing up its ending. And I mean its true ending, so spoiler warnings ahoy! If you recall, Toonami broadcast the series in 2001, but left out the 12th and final episode. Why? Well, because there's a scene where a bunch of kids are skinny dipping in a hot spring. Yup, even as edited and censored as it was, there was no cutting around an entire scene where kids are naked in a pool, so Turner just axed the episode and pretended the 11th episode was the last one. Which, honestly, might have been for the best. Though I have tried to avoid spoilers by not talking about the plot directly, when it comes to the last episode, there's no sense in pussyfooting around because it sucks out loud. Still searching for the missing Shiro and Aina after they successfully helped destroy Aina's brother's weapon of destruction, Miko and the former gorilla Kiki happen upon a lead to their whereabouts through a group of abandoned children. They eventually revealed that Aina and Shiro taught them how to survive and even gave them names after the 8th MS team. But they all disappeared the morning after.
Maybe they were ghosts.
I don't think they were either one. I believe they went off on a search of their own somewhere.
And what would they be searching for?
Same as everyone. A new world.
Okay. And Kiki and Mikkel just find Shiro and Aina in a cabin in the woods, and with barely enough time before the credits start rolling. That's how this show ends? This puttering, meandering, barely alive episode that has a needless, thoughtless mystery turn is supposed to be our emotional climax? This should be Red reuniting with Andy Dufresne at the end of Shawshank Redemption, not whatever this is. I'm not even sure what was the thought process behind the making of this episode. The story has nothing to do with what happened in the show proper, and just as soon as it appears, it disappears. Never mind the fact that these kids were supposed to be lab rats in a Xeon experiment, which only opens up a whole other can of worms that the show refuses to address. That these kids exist at all in the plot of the episode is baffling to me. It's one of the most derailing, out of nowhere, and confusing endings of an anime I've seen in years. Hell, even Evangelion had the explanation of ran out of budget. But as much as the ending pisses in our pool, it's certainly not enough to ruin the entirety of the series. Hell, you could do what Toonami did and just pretend that the 11th episode is the final episode. It works just as well. To summarize 8th MS Team as a whole, I would say that it's an anime that almost seems like it's fighting against itself. The way they tried to marry their tropes between space opera and war movie is admirable, but these two just do not mix. But looking on the bright side, which I believe this show has earned, you could say that 8th MS Team is unique within the canon of the franchise because of it, and easily the most grounded and, dare I say, visceral of the entirety of Gundam until Iron-Blooded Orphans came out. There is a lot to praise here, and with the anime getting a Blu-ray release, complete with the Miller's Report OVA, which admittedly is basically a glorified recap episode, and with the entire series also on Hulu, it's one that should be on your watch list. If for nothing else, 8th MS Team features what is probably the best Gundam fight scene in the entire franchise.
Well, Miss Aina, the Kurgan will have to leave without me. I have found the place where I am to die.
And yet, despite my praises for it, 8th MS Team is not my personal favorite Gundam. That title belongs to another OVA. And yeah, I'll explain myself. Till next time.